Before I get started, I just wanted to thank everyone who has supported the channel, whether that be through subscribing, liking the videos, commenting, sharing, or whatever. I appreciate it. Today is the anniversary for the first video I did on this channel, and there's a lot more to come in the future. The first video I did was about Indiana, so I thought it would only be fitting to talk about them exactly a year later. When Indiana got the first round draft pick a while back, I made a video about what I think the Indiana Fever should do in the offseason. Today I will be following up that video. I'll compare the things I said and compare it to what Indiana actually did during the offseason, and go over which things aged well and things that did not. But that's enough talking. Time to get into it. I'll play segments from the video and give my thoughts on it. I'll skip the intro part and go straight into the roster moves section. Literally the first video I ever did on this channel talked about Indiana getting rid of Erica Wheeler. Even without Caitlin Clark, I think they should do this. And it isn't just me, Indiana fans have been saying this forever. But with Caitlin being there, it's now or never. The odds of her and Caitlin getting along are very low. They are both ball-dominant players who take a ton of shots. Erica being there would hurt Caitlin Clark's development and is guaranteed to frustrate the fans. Caitlin will be too. This is a disaster waiting to happen. It was funny seeing the amount of hype Erica Wheeler was getting from new fans, because the people that have been watching the Fever for a while knew what was coming. It only took a few games for people to become very annoyed with Erica Wheeler. But to be honest, I can't blame her. It's Lynn Dunn's fault for greenlighting a max contract. It never made any sense to do that, and because of it, she's near untradeable. I think there's only two teams that would trade for Erica without asking for a bunch of picks or demanding a player like NaLyssa Smith. That's the Connecticut Sun and Phoenix Mercury. The Connecticut Sun badly need guard depth. They could trade Erica for a pick or a random player because the Sun will be able to eat the salary. But the ideal situation would be to trade with the Phoenix Mercury and try to get Megan Gustafson for Erica Wheeler. She's a former Iowa player and a mini Aaliyah Boston, so she would be the perfect backup if Aaliyah Boston gets in foul trouble. Phoenix is most likely losing Skylar, and Diana's on her last leg, so I think Phoenix would make the deal. Trading Erica Wheeler was a massive long shot, so I'm not going to criticize Indiana for not doing it. Even though I've been harsh on her, I think Erica Wheeler does have a place in this league as a backup scoring guard. The issue is that she's getting paid as much as the best players in the league. This might sound crazy, but I think the Indiana Fever should trade Kelsey Mitchell for Marina Mabrey, and I think Chicago would be very willing to make the trade. And it's a great fit on the court. Marina has played with Ogunbowale, who is a very ball-dominant player, for multiple years, so she won't have a problem with playing with Caitlin. She's also a better playmaker than Kelsey, which will help with a team that has so many scoring options. At the time, me suggesting that Indiana should trade Kelsey Mitchell for Marina Mabrey was not a very popular opinion, but I think the first 10 games or so have shown exactly why Indiana should have attempted to make that deal. The irony is, at the time, it was widely considered a bad trade for Indiana. But now, if Indiana tried to propose that trade, Chicago would hang up immediately. She's having her best season so far, and has been a good veteran presence in Chicago. Most people, when they think of Mabrey, associate her with the ridiculous trade that Chicago did to get her, which was a massive overpay. But if you look past that, she's a very good basketball player. The biggest separator for me is the playmaking. I'd argue Mabrey and Mitchell are around the same in terms of being able to score the basketball, but the gap between their ability to pass and distribute to other teammates is very noticeable. Mabrey has played with the biggest high-volume shooter for several years, Arike Ogunbowale, so it would have been a lot easier for her to adjust to a ball-dominant player like Caitlin Clark compared to Kelsey Mitchell. The only thing I don't like about Marina is that if she's having an off shooting night, she doesn't care. She will keep chucking. It's burned Chicago a couple times this year. But then again, Kelsey Mitchell does the same thing. Mabrey is also a better defender. That all being said, it doesn't change the fact Kelsey Mitchell is still a very good basketball player. Even with her recent struggles, she has been one of the better players for Indiana. She was the leading scorer in the only 2 games they have won. She's a free agent after this year, so Indiana has to be careful and not run her off, and have her leave for nothing in return. Caitlin Clark will need an enforcer. WNBA players love taking cheap shots at rookies, and it's branded as a welcome to the WNBA moment. I'm sure people will feel some type of way about me saying that, but if you guys really want me to make a compilation of rookies getting cheap shotted, I can. Marina Mabrey isn't going to tolerate people taking shots at her teammates. Indiana will need a player that has an edge and isn't afraid to get feisty. Caitlin Clark loves engaging in extracurricular activities. So it will help to have a player like Marina Mabrey who will serve as distraction, especially when it comes to getting potential technical fouls. This is one thing I hate about the mainstream coverage when it comes to the WNBA. They know rookies have been getting cheap shotted for years, but now they are acting like it's never happened before. I don't like the dirty play. I never liked it, but it's always been this way. Only difference is more people are seeing it now. As far as Mabrey being an enforcer goes, I'm not too sure about that now, because she and the rest of the Chicago Sky clearly wanted no parts of Alyssa Thomas. I can't blame them though, but I'll move on to free agency. In the hypothetical I presented, Indiana would get Megan Gustafson. But if this doesn't happen, Indiana could sign Monica Sonato. She's undersized and struggles defensively, but she has improved her game overseas, and it helps that she has a lot of chemistry with Caitlin Clark. Monica Sonato is currently playing overseas in Hungary, and she's doing really well. Obviously, the WNBA is much tougher than a league in Hungary, but I don't think Monica Sonato being a WNBA level player is completely out of bounds. However, I'm not as confident about this as I was several months ago. In theory, Monica would be the backup for Aaliyah Boston and try to mimic some of her production. But the fact Indiana hasn't been able to get Caitlin and Boston to consistently work well together gives me pause. It seems like Caitlin Clark wants to play with faster and more mobile players like Fagbenle. Speaking of Fagbenle, that was a massive steal by Indiana. That was by far their best free agency signing, and I don't think it's close. She's hurt right now, but she'll be back eventually. She has great chemistry with Caitlin Clark, and has been Indiana's most efficient player so far. Indiana signed Katie Lou Samuelson to a 2-year, $355,000 contract. Katie Lou has been on 4 teams in 5 years. It seems like every team tries to recreate her UConn days, then gets disappointed when it doesn't happen. At some point, teams just gotta be honest about the type of impact she can have. She can be a really good role player, but expecting her to be a key starter isn't realistic at this point. But that's exactly what Indiana tried to do, and it failed miserably. She's coming off the bench now, which makes a lot more sense. They also signed Damiris Dantas. This makes me a little nervous because I could totally see Christy Sides cutting Celeste Taylor or Lexi Hull for her instead of Christy Wallace. But they badly need post depth, so I do like the Dantas signing. Now we get to the draft. I think Indiana should get JC Sheldon. She's a fast-paced player which will work great with Indiana. She's a good three-point shooter, and in general a good scorer, which will help with bench depth. She also puts a lot of effort on defense. The worst thing that could have happened to Indiana was JC Sheldon balling out in the second half of the season. Indiana was never going to be able to draft JC Sheldon in the second round, but if she was a late first-round pick, they could have traded up without much resistance. But the fact that Dallas drafted her at 5 means they weren't going to entertain any offers for her. I'm a huge JC Sheldon fan, but I really thought that was a reach, especially since they had the 9th pick anyway. The player Indiana ended up drafting in the second round is Celeste Taylor. There's a lot of discourse in regards to whether or not Indiana screwed up by drafting Celeste Taylor instead of Kate Martin. This is something I'll defend Indiana on. It was the right choice. Kate Martin would help make Caitlin more comfortable, but Indiana was horrendous on defense last year. Celeste Taylor was the best defender in the Big Ten, so it makes sense from that perspective. And Celeste Taylor's off-ball movement, rim running, and ability to knock down open shots makes her a good fit for Caitlin and the new Indiana Fever system. There also was good reason to believe Kate was going to be available in the 3rd round, but the Aces shocked everyone by taking her in the 2nd. Kate Martin is doing very well on the Aces, but I really do not believe she would have the same success at Indiana. The first reason being is that it's very unlikely Christie would even give her the playing time to prove herself. We've seen Indiana lose by over 20 points, and she still refuses to put people outside of the main rotation in the game until there's like 2 minutes left. The second reason being that Becky Hammon is a way better coach than Christie. Kate Martin is surrounded by Chelsea Gray, Kelsey Plum, Alicia Clark, and Jackie Young. We're talking about a group of highly skilled veterans that Kate is going against in practice and is learning from. Which guards is Kate Martin supposed to learn from at Indiana? Christy Wallace? Erica Wheeler? I'm glad Kate went to the Aces because Indiana would have probably wasted her anyway. Celeste Taylor is getting no real time to prove herself, and I think it would have been the same thing with Kate Martin. All of this begs the question, did Indiana make the right moves in the offseason? Did they put themselves in the best position to win games this year? Excluding drafting Caitlin Clark. Because I mean literally all 11 teams would have done the same, I would still argue Indiana had a decent offseason. It could have been better, but I don't think their offseason was a failure. As I mentioned earlier, signing Temi Fagbenley was a great signing. They overpaid a bit for Katie Lou Samuelson. If they were going to spend that type of money, they should have targeted a better player, like Alana Smith. Damiris Dantas is a good player, but the issue is they need someone now. If and when she is ready to play for Indiana, they will probably have dug too big of a hole. Last year, the Fever was 3-8 in their first 11 games. You would think Indiana not losing any key players while drafting Caitlin Clark, Celeste Taylor, and signing Fagbenley, Katie Lou Samuelson would mean they would be a better team, but they are even worse. I'm going to be honest. I thought Grace Berger would be further along in her development. I thought she would be good enough to start for Indiana this year and be the secondary playmaker after Caitlin Clark. It's not totally her fault, as it's hard to get a rhythm when you're erratically subbed in and out the game. But I would be lying if I said I didn't think we would see more from her. I was very high on the Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark duo in the offseason. Aaliyah Boston was only a rookie last year and she was cooking the league. I thought having Caitlin would skyrocket her performance, but so far the opposite has been true. Usually when one does well, the other struggles. Indiana has not had many games this year where both were firing on all cylinders. The glass half full mindset would be that Indiana will look a lot better as the season goes on. They are struggling because they had to play so many games in a short time and are barely getting any time to practice. The more pessimistic perspective would be that the team is struggling because most of the players don't fit the new system they are running with Caitlin Clark, and it's not going to work even with more playing time. If you're an Indiana Fever fan, you hope it's the former and not the latter. The next few games will be very telling. Well, besides the Mystics game, beating a winless team is nothing to brag about. But if they are able to win 2 out of the 3 games after that, I think that means Indiana is about to turn the corner and sneak into the playoffs. However, let's say they lose 3 out of the next 4 games. Or even worse, lose all 4. The higher-ups at the Fever have to have a serious conversation about who should and shouldn't be with the team anymore. They just got a 5-day break, so having no time to practice or fatigue are no longer excuses. Indiana's core 4 of Aaliyah Boston, Caitlin Clark, Nalissa Smith, and Kelsey Mitchell are too good to be losing as many games as they are. Fagbenley healthy or not, they should be winning more games. But that's all for today. Do you think Indiana did enough before the season started? What should they do now? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.